In this training video, we're going to have a look at a key setting in Gearlog, which is that of sites. The term site in Gearlog is used to refer to a physical location where you might keep equipment. Sites are organised in a hierarchy. The highest level could be country level, followed by city, followed by building, followed by room, followed by cupboard, followed by shelf. You get the general idea. So we're descending through a hierarchy to get to a location where we can specifically and accurately identify a piece of equipment. It's certainly worth putting together your settings and including those specifically doing your sites before you start to add equipment to the platform. Let's have a look at the settings for sites. On the settings menu, pick Sites tool. It's worth noting at this point that if you don't like the word site, you can of course head over to your profile, and on here there is a setting for that where you could change it to, for example, location or place, whatever takes your preference. For now, we'll leave it set as sites as that's the general term. Let's just quickly orientate ourselves on the page. At the top, we get a little filter, which helps us to control all of the sites that we can see on the page. And below that, each of the sites organised in a hierarchy. So just to get familiar with that, top level here would be a climbing centre located in the town of Buxton in the United Kingdom. And that's been broken down into 3 subsites: a bouldering room, an equipment store, and a rope climbing room. And of course, we could go further with this analogy and start to break the equipment store down into shelves, cupboards, racking units, so on and so forth. When you have a large number of sites, it can be useful to change the display style here from being indented and nested backwards and forwards. So indented is as we see it now, where each one in the hierarchy is pushed in a little bit. Nested, we only see the top level ones, and then as we start to expand them, we can see the others inside. So the choice is yours as to which you prefer. Generally, nested is better when you have lots and lots of sites in a complex hierarchy, and indented is better when you only have a few. Sites are really important within the platform. They're used to record where a piece of equipment is stored at. They're used as a filter on the equipment page. They're used as a filter on our reports page and on our dashboards. And they can even be used to control what equipment users see when they log into the platform. So it's definitely worth taking the time to understand how to use the sites tool. Let's spend a few minutes together now putting a site into the platform so we can get a general feel to do that, and then have a look at how those sites are used in various places across the platform. To hit a new site, we're going to hit plus. Start off with a name for the site. Let's pretend for the purposes of this training session that we're opening a new water park in the Cotswolds in the United Kingdom. So we'll give the site a name to begin with. Call it Cotswold Water Park. Pick a colour for the site. It can be useful to discriminate between your sites, helps it easier to recognise them. So maybe for watery kind of things, we prefer perhaps a pale blue. Rock, we might prefer a pale grey. First aid centres might be red. You get the general idea. Again, a picture or an icon is nice for a site. It just helps you to quickly visually recognise what you're dealing with. So we can upload there a little picture, which will be stored and used as an icon for that site. Let's have a look at some of the other options when we're adding sites. The next one is this a real place, or is it just used to organise the other ones? So those ones where we put yes here, we can think of this more like a folder that we're using to organise things below it, but we're not actually expecting to place any equipment there. So for example, if we were doing country level, United Kingdom, we could place at the top level and just turn on yes here because we're using it to organise the city level sites that come below it, but we're not storing any equipment at the national level. So generally that's used where you're not actually expecting to place equipment there, but it helps you to master the complexity of all of the sites that you've got. Quick deployment is a really useful tool. Of your total number of sites, those that you mark as being quick deploy will appear on the quick deploy option for equipment and allow you to rapidly send a piece of equipment to that place. It's a really useful tool for picking a subset of your sites where you often move equipment between and being able to quickly access those. We'll have a look in a moment at how that actually gets used inside the platform. If you're building a hierarchy, then this is where you would place it. So for example, if we were creating a subsite underneath our climbing centre in Buxton, below the equipment store, we then might create another site underneath that for a cupboard. We would then make the equipment store the parent of this. The one we're creating is a new top level site, so we'll leave that without a parent. We can also say if there's a main contact for the site. So that would be one of our users who's perhaps the quartermaster or the manager at that site. So we can associate a user with that. We can also put in where that site is, and that's very useful if we want to see it on our dashboard tool that has a map view. There's a specific training video for the map view tool, so go and have a look at that one. But if we start to, for example, pop in some locations in here, we'll just pop it in Cotswolds for the moment. You would put in a more accurate location, and that will then be able to pinpoint that site on a map of the United Kingdom. If you also want any information to be shown to your users when they make a reservation for equipment at this place, for example, where to come to get the equipment or what the opening times are, then you can include that information at the site level here. And when reservations are made for equipment at that site, that information will be shown to users. And just a final detail is if you're on one of our platforms, our enterprise platform, where you're using payment processing integration, then you can also indicate for each site that you have whether a refundable guarantee is required. That's not going to be relevant for the majority of our users, but for those of us who are doing payment processing through the platform, that's a very useful option. So just to recap those very quickly, the most important things would be to give it a name, a color, and a picture. So you recognize the site, decide where in the hierarchy it sits so it's correctly represented, and have a think about whether you're just putting it in so you can organize the other sites, or whether you'd actually like to store information at it, and if so, if it should be a quick deploy site, enabling you to rapidly move equipment to it. We can save our new site, pop it onto the platform. It's appeared there at the top level, ready for us to start adding new sites, new sub-locations inside that one. As mentioned earlier, really useful to set up your sites because they get reflected in a number of places across the platform. Let's have a look at a couple of those places so we can see where sites start to pop up. Starting on the equipment page, when we're looking on the filter panel, we can see the most important filter right there at the top is to show equipment only at a certain site. It can be very, very useful for scoping your equipment down. Scroll down a little bit further and have a look at a piece of equipment. What we can do when we're adding or editing equipment on the platform, in its identification section, state which site it's present at. Let's have a look at the reports menu. On the reports, generally most of the reports will enable you to filter down by site. So if we pop open on any report, the filter options, we'll see site will pop up. There's quite a common filter on there. If we're looking at our dashboard tools, and then dashboard, again, we'll see inside those filters for the dashboard tool, down in our data options, the options only include gear at a particular site again. So again, another very commonly used filter. When we're thinking about using our user accounts, one of the other things we can do is we can link our users to sites as well. That's covered in a little bit more detail on our specific video for user account settings, but let's just look at it briefly now as well. When we're back here on the sites tool, what we can do, along with assigning equipment to these sites, we can also link a user to that site. And we can then say, this user can only see equipment at this site and below it, or they can jump between the sites. So for example, if we had a centre manager at this climbing centre in Buxton, they don't need to see any of the other sites in the UK or any of the equipment at them because it's just not part of their job. So in that situation, we can associate that user with that physical site, and when they log into the platform, all of their equipment and views and reports will be filtered to start at the top of the hierarchy that they can see, but they won't be able to see the rest of it. Now, as mentioned, that ability to control what a user sees by their site is explained in more detail in our video related to user permissions. So go check out that video to have a look at that one. Last place that it's worthwhile mentioning sites on as well is on our import tools as well. There's a specific video geared around how to import equipment from a spreadsheet, but if you are doing that, one of the columns in that importer is the ID of the site, and that will automatically assign the equipment to the correct site as you import it. Another good reason to set up your sites before you start importing. You might be wondering where you would get the ID of that site from that you could include in the import file, and the answer to that is quite simply to open up the site and that ID number is there. So if you use that in your spreadsheet imports, you'll be able to automatically assign equipment to that site. So in that training video, we covered what the Gearlog concept of the site is and why it's useful, showed you some of the options you can use when creating a site and how to nest them underneath each other, and then had a look at how that sites option appears in a number of places on the platform. not least in adding equipment, filtering equipment, looking at dashboards, running reports, and also controlling your users and importing as well. Hopefully you find that useful. Any questions or any problems, as always, just drop us a message, info@gearlog.org.